The Tipsy Griffin was known for two things, its ale and its chaos, not necessarily in that order. The ale was brewed with a secret recipe passed down through generations, making it the most sought-after drink in the realm. But the chaos? That was a different story altogether. Every night, without fail, something would go awry. Tonight, chaos reigned supreme. A brawl had erupted near the fireplace, where the warmth of the fire did little to quell the rising tempers. Dwarves were shouting, their voices booming over the din. A lute, once the source of merry tunes, lay broken on the floor, a casualty of the night's events. And in the middle of it all, a mug went flying. It wasn't just any mug, mind you. This mug had a story of its own. Not just any mug. This mug was enchanted. It glowed with a faint, otherworldly light, hinting at the powerful magic contained within. It belonged to a very powerful and very absent wizard. The wizard, known for his unpredictable nature, had left his belongings behind, perhaps as a test or a trap. No one knew for sure. The mug soared through the air, spinning slowly as if defying the very laws of physics. A hush fell over the tavern, as if the chaos itself were holding its breath. Every eye was on the mug, waiting to see where it would land. The mug landed with a dull thud, the sound echoing through the now silent room. It rolled towards a group of adventurers who eyed it with a mixture of apprehension and thirst. They knew that touching the mug could bring either great fortune or terrible misfortune. The adventurers were an eclectic bunch, even by Tipsy Griffin standards. They had seen their fair share of strange occurrences, but this was something new. A bard, a barbarian, a rogue, each with their own unique skills and stories, and a wizard walked into a tavern. It sounded like the beginning of a joke. But it was far from it. It wasn't a joke. It was just another Tuesday at the Tipsy Griffin. The air crackled with energy. The mug glowed brighter and brighter until it vanished in a flash of light. The silence broke as quickly as it had come. The brawl resumed as if nothing had happened. The adventurers, however, were left to ponder the mystery of the disappearing mug. What did it mean? Why had it chosen them? Little did they know, their lives were about to get a whole lot more interesting. The enchanted mug was just the beginning of a series of events that would lead them on an adventure unlike any they had ever experienced. The Tipsy Griffin had a way of turning ordinary nights into extraordinary tales, and this night was no exception. There was Fumblemore, the bard. He was a man of many dreams, but very few talents. His heart was in the right place, but his fingers never quite found the right strings. He was known for his questionable lyrics and even more questionable lute skills. His songs often left audiences more confused than entertained, and his lute playing was more akin to a cat walking across piano keys. His current instrument was held together by hope and string, mostly hope. Each performance was a gamble, and more often than not, the lute would give up before the song was over. Next to him sat Brunhilde, the barbarian. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of muscle and might, with a heart as big as her biceps. She was built like an oak tree and about as subtle. Her strength was legendary, but her finesse was non-existent. She could crush a boulder with her bare hands, but struggled to open a jar of pickles. She had a tendency to misplace things, including, but not limited to, her axe. It was a running joke among the group that Brunhilde could lose her own shadow if she wasn't careful. Across the table was Sly, the rogue, a man of mystery and shadows. Sly was as elusive as a whisper in the wind. Sly wasn't his real name, of course. He had more aliases than a spy and changed them as often as he changed his socks, which was not very often. No one knew his real name. That was the point of being a rogue. His past was a tapestry of half-truths and outright lies, woven together with a thread of secrecy. That was the point of being a rogue. He thrived in the shadows, where his nimble fingers could work their magic, often at the expense of someone else's coin purse. He was currently attempting to relieve Fumblemore of his spare loot picks. Again, it was a game they played, though Fumblemore was rarely aware he was playing. And finally, there was Merlin, the wizard, a man of great intellect and even greater allergies. Merlin wasn't allergic to magic. No, his affliction was far more inconvenient. He was allergic to spell components, the very things he needed to cast his spells. He was allergic to spell components. This made his chosen profession somewhat challenging. Every incantation was accompanied by a symphony of sneezes and sniffles. This made his chosen profession somewhat challenging. Yet despite his constant battle with his own nose, Merlin's spells were powerful, if a bit unpredictable. They were not the most competent group of adventurers. In fact, they were probably the least competent group in the entire kingdom. They were not even the most competent group of drinkers. Their attempts at camaraderie often ended in spilled ale and broken mugs. But they were all the Tipsy Griffin had on this particular Tuesday. The tavern was a haven for misfits, and these four were its most frequent patrons. And so, the quest of the missing mug fell upon their very unqualified shoulders. It was a task that seemed simple enough, but with this group, nothing was ever simple. The adventurers peered under the table. A squirrel, perched on a half-eaten bread roll, regarded them with bright eyes. "Nutkins, I believe I can help you find your mug. Fumblemore? Did that squirrel just talk? Brunhilde probably ate the wrong mushroom. Slight, think I can teach it to pickpocket? Merlin, I'm allergic to talking squirrels." The squirrel puffed up his chest. "Nutkins, my name is Nutkins, and I saw where the mug went. Follow me." And with a flick of his tail, he scampered out of the tavern. The adventurers, spurred on by a combination of curiosity, boredom, and the last dregs of ale, decided to follow. What could possibly go wrong? A lot, as it turned out, could go wrong. Nutkins, it seemed, had a rather loose definition of following. He led them through back alleys, over fences, and directly into a flock of very surprised and surprisingly aggressive chickens. Fumblemore. I thought squirrels were supposed to climb trees, not chase them. Their journey also involved a very grumpy armadillo who took exception to Brunhilde, mistaking him for a footstool, and a tripwire trap that left Sly hanging upside down from a tree. Sly. "Don't mind me, just getting a new perspective. Nutkins, almost there. I can practically smell the mug." The adventurers, however, were beginning to suspect that Nutkins couldn't smell a troll in a dung heap. Nutkins, after much zigzagging and several near encounters with stray dogs, finally led them to their destination, the Goblin Market. The journey had been long and treacherous, filled with unexpected twists and turns. Nutkins, with his keen sense of direction, managed to navigate through the maze-like paths, avoiding the stray dogs that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The group was exhausted but relieved to have finally arrived. It was a chaotic mess of stalls, selling everything from dubious potions to slightly less dubious vegetables. The market was alive with the sounds of haggling and the clinking of coins. Each stall seemed to offer something more bizarre than the last, from glowing potions that promised eternal youth to vegetables that looked like they had been plucked from a nightmare. The air was thick with the smell of cabbage and questionable hygiene. It was a sensory overload, with the pungent aroma of various foods mixing with the less pleasant smells of the market. The group wrinkled their noses but pressed on, determined to find what they were looking for.
"A mug? Lost, you say?" The confusion was evident on their faces as they tried to make sense of the chaotic surroundings. They had come here with a purpose, but the overwhelming nature of the market made it difficult to focus.
A goblin with one eye and a surfeit of teeth grinned at them. His grin was unsettling, revealing rows of sharp teeth that seemed too many for his small mouth. He looked like he knew something they didn't, and that made them uneasy.
"Plenty of mugs here. What'll you trade?" The goblin's voice was raspy, and his eyes gleamed with mischief. He seemed eager to make a deal, but the group was wary of what he might want in return.
Fumblemore, ever the charmer, attempted to barter with a song. His voice echoed through the market, drawing the attention of nearby goblins and traders. He sang of bravery and adventure, hoping to win them over with his charm. The goblin, unimpressed, offered him a rusty bucket in exchange for his pants. Fumblemore's face fell as he realized his song had not had the desired effect. The goblin's offer was both insulting and ridiculous, but it was clear he was serious. Brunhilde, mistaking a particularly large turnip for a weapon, nearly started another brawl. Her eyes widened as she brandished the turnip, ready to defend herself. The market-goers backed away, unsure whether to laugh or be afraid. Sly naturally saw the entire market as his personal shopping mall. He moved from stall to stall, examining the goods with a critical eye. Nothing seemed to escape his notice, and he was always on the lookout for a good deal. He returned with a live chicken tucked under his arm, claiming it was a limited edition, self-plucking duster. The group stared at him in disbelief, but Sly was unfazed. He was convinced he had found a treasure, even if it was a bit unconventional.
"I'm allergic to goblins," he declared, "and bartering, and possibly chickens." His sneezes echoed through the market, causing the goblins to scatter. The group couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation, even as they tried to figure out their next move.
The mug, it turned out, was not at the goblin market.
Well, after much sniffing and head-scratching, I might have taken a wrong turn somewhere near the grumpy armadillo.
He pointed us in the direction of a particularly gloomy swamp.
Charming.
The swamp lived up to its gloomy reputation. It was a symphony of croaking frogs, buzzing insects, and the occasional bubbling mud pit.
Brunhilde, with her usual grace, managed to get stuck knee-deep in mud.
Fumblemore, attempting to serenade a particularly melodic frog, lost his lute in a bog.
Sly, convinced the swamp was filled with valuable treasures, kept disappearing under the surface, only to reappear covered in pondweed and sputtering about giant carnivorous goldfish.
Meanwhile, Merlin discovered a new allergy swamp gas.
Finally, after what felt like a lifetime in the swamp, and smelled even worse, here it is, the mug.
He perched on a moss-covered rock next to a familiar-looking glowing mug.
The adventurers, covered in mud, leeches, and a healthy dose of swamp water, collapsed onto the nearest dryish patch of ground. We did it.
About time.
Even Merlin, despite sneezing violently, managed a weak smile. They had faced angry chickens, grumpy armadillos, dubious goblins, and a swamp that smelled like a troll's armpit. And they had found the mug. They were heroes. Well, almost. As they reached for the mug, a giant frog hopped onto the rock, snatched it up in its mouth, and hopped away. It croaked loudly, a sound suspiciously like a belch, and vanished into the swamp. The adventurers stared at the spot where the mug had been. Silence reigned. Then Fumblemore started laughing. It was a hysterical, slightly unhinged laugh, but it was laughter nonetheless. Soon, even Brunhilde and Sly were chuckling. Merlin, after a particularly violent sneeze that almost knocked him off his feet, joined in as well. They had come so close, only to be outdone by a frog with a taste for enchanted drinkware. It was, when you thought about it, hilarious. The mug, nestled comfortably in the giant frog's stomach, glowed faintly. It had seen a lot in its long life, but this was a new one. Still, it mused, at least there was a never-ending supply of flies in here. And, it thought, as the frog hopped towards a particularly tempting-looking dragonfly, the adventure wasn't over yet. The mug had a feeling they'd be seeing those adventurers again, and it couldn't wait.